with the rise in energy rates, it's created another opportunity for renewables. We're talking about economics behind renewables, not just being good stewards. So
Absolutely.
and then there's a resiliency play too.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by the Clean Power Consulting Group. Check out all of our content at cleanpower.group/podcast. I'm Tim Montague, your host. The price of energy is going up in America. Today, my guest is Michael Decaluwe. He is the Senior Vice President at a company called Nania Energy, and we are going to be breaking down energy markets so that you energy professionals can better understand what's going on. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you coming on the show and looking forward to better understanding why the cost of energy is going up in America. Not only in America, of course, it's going up globally, but give our listeners a little background on yourself. How did you get into energy and what is Nania Energy?
Sure. We're a energy advisement company. There's about 20 of us. I started about 15 years ago. I'd love to give you a story that I came from the energy industry. I actually came from the company. I was really drawn to John Nania, the founder, and the level of people that were at the company. So joined about 15 years ago. We've expanded to just under 20 people now. We've got customers in about 28 states, about 5,000 to 6,000 unique customer accounts that we service.
And in terms of the RTOs that you service, what RTOs are you active in?
Anywhere from ISO, the New York ISO, New England ISO, ERCOT. We've got some CAISO and California customers. So basically any deregulated market.
Don't forget PJM.
Specifically for electricity.
You didn't.
Did I not say PJM? Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. And then various, we do actually do a lot of natural gas as well.
And I mean, I've definitely noticed that my gas bill is more this year than in previous years, but I haven't particularly noticed that my energy bill is up, but a lot of consumers are complaining to me that their energy bill is more than previously. So what is going on? What's the big picture? We're here recording in mid-April of 2022. What's the big picture on energy in the United States right now?
Sure. Your impact on your bill is going to be isolated to several markets. So it's depending on the region that you're in. I'll give you an example. California is extremely expensive right now, primarily because of government and regulatory activity. The other markets that we've seen that are very high are New England and New York. Those that are basically cut off from U.S. gas because of infrastructure. Frankly, we don't have the pipes that get gas to that New England market, so they're relying on the international price of natural gas, which is about 6 times what the U.S. cost of gas is. So those markets specifically are seeing drastic increases. Certainly in PJM, between now and the low point that we saw during COVID, the low point for electricity pricing, we've about doubled. So if you lock during that time and you're seeing new rates, it could be quite drastic, the difference in cost. But this market, though, we've seen some tempering for that higher cost because some of those the PJM capacity costs are coming down starting in June of this year. So that's tempered some of the sticker shock that we've seen in other markets as far as electricity. But primarily right now, it's going to be regionally based. Those kind of extreme differences in cost.
And so if you look backwards for the trailing 10 years, what was the average escalator on electricity over that period of time?
It depends on the market, Tim. So for Illinois, we've kind of from an all-in rate standpoint, we've oscillated between 7 cents and down lower 5 cents right now. The rates that we've seen recently are in that 6 cent range. So we're not seeing what we saw specifically in 2008 when we had the commodities bubble. We're not to that level yet, but there's worries that we could get there and surpass.
But so can in the solar industry, it's vital that you create a financial model for how a solar energy is going to impact your power bill. And then you're always putting an escalator on that to cover for inflation. For example, we would use 2.5%. Well, last year,
Mhm.
inflation was 10%. Inflation went up last year. But if you look back over the last 10
Right.
years prior to last year, maybe, was it 2%? Was it 1% on average in the US? We had fairly low inflation, right? And now we've come into an inflationary period,
Yeah.
and there's COVID and there's supply chain issues, and it's this confluence of events. But before the chaos that we're in today, what could people expect, and what can
Correct.
people expect, and how do people plan for this? If you have a big power bill, you could be
Right.
paying millions of dollars a year in electricity bills, right? And so you do want a
Right.
good, robust financial model so that you can budget for that. But give us a little more detail on past and present.
Yeah. Past, we saw actually a negative number, and starting from probably 2011 or 2012, we were continually going in front of clients with lower and lower rates. That model, that just became an expectation. Every year we were seeing a lower rate to customers. So, to your point about modeling it, people frankly probably got a little spoiled and seeing low rates, especially compared to where the world was and where the world is now. And now a few things are happening that shifted that overnight. And some of it has to do with inflation. You're seeing supply chain issues at the production. You have natural gas producers not able to build new infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
because of supply chain. We're seeing the employment lack of employees affecting production as well. The guys that were on rigs years ago are now on top of windmills, and they're typically getting higher paid and better jobs. So attracting that those employees back to the market is going to be hard to do. And third, you've got the rise in ESG. And overnight, natural gas was the darling of the electricity industry for years. It was replacing coal, and then overnight, it's kind of the redheaded stepchild that people don't want to touch natural gas. It's got a carbon footprint to it, and basically overnight, gas is now the enemy. We're seeing some states outlaw new natural gas heating and new construction, and that certainly had an effect too.
I know that's
Of,
happening in California. Is that happening in other states now where they're outlawing natural gas in new construction?
Yeah, New York City passed some, and again, just to give context, is when the U.S. dropped out of the Paris
Yeah.
climate accord, a lot of the states and specifically the cities, and many were already doing it too, but they really rose
Mm-hmm.
and took that mantle and have passed their own carbon
Sure.
laws. Illinois just passed their energy bill last year. There's a bill up in front of Maryland right now. So we're seeing more and more activity on the state and the municipal level. And New York, I think in the city, they've outlawed new natural gas, specifically for heating and stove.
Yeah.
And there was legislation up before the state legislature to expand that. But basically, what's that done is that's created the environment to where natural gas, specifically the pipeline companies, they don't want to build what's called a stranded asset. They don't want to build out their
Of course.
pipelines knowing that our use of natural gas is probably going down. So that's affected not only the supply and the production, but also the logistics to get it to market.
Well, and pretty soon we'll be shipping more natural gas to Europe because the Europeans are trying to wean themselves off of Russian gas, which they're highly dependent on. I mean, I think Germany gets half its energy
Yes.
from Russia, and that's not a happy situation. So if you're a natural gas producer,
Right.
you're probably okay in the near term. But the writing is on the wall that the U.S. is starting to transition away from natural gas, and now we have viable utilities or appliances. I mean, these fancy stoves and heat pump water heaters. And you can go all electric, right? It comes at a price, but you can go all electric, and then you could theoretically
Right.
create all of your juice with a solar array and have a totally clean facility, carbon free, depending on the nuances. But so let's talk a little
Mhm.
more, I guess, about electricity markets in PJM and MISO, and maybe in New York ISO. Those are three very large ISOs, and Very good solar markets, generally speaking. So we're we solar professionals are very active in these markets. You and I have kicked the tires on several projects, and I've worked extensively with your colleagues, and we're grateful for all of that. And it's just a matter of time before solar starts to go more mainstream here in Illinois. But one of the barriers to entry in the Midwest is that just cheap price of power. I'm now famous for saying I buy power here in MISO at 4.5 cents as a little old resident here. I'm not even a big consumer, right? And the big consumers are certainly getting a penny off of that probably. And so what that means is it's a slower payback period for solar because you're installing technology on your roof or on your ground that makes electrons from sunlight. The sunlight's free. The technology is like buying a power plant. You're pre-buying some energy that you can then harvest, but you got to pay for the technology. And so the value of those electrons, meaning the kWh that they're offsetting, dramatically impacts the ROI. So we do care a lot about the price of energy. What do you see in your crystal ball? Like what's going on in real time and where do you see the market going?
Right. We're getting the crystal ball question 9 times out of every 10
Yep.
appointments. And we tell customers our crystal ball is broken. But the thing about that is, if you said the market's going up, I could give you 5 reasons why it would go down. Most times when you see high inflation, it's followed by recession. If recession hits, demand goes down. We can expect energy to go down. Conversely, if you said you think it's going down, I could give you 10 reasons why it's going to continue to go up. Our natural gas is priced at 1/6 of what the world's price is at. As we export more, that's going to, are we tied more to that international market versus ours? There's logistical issues with getting gas to market. There's this new ESG phenomenon it's good for the environment, but it's going to raise prices. So with any position you took from a crystal ball standpoint, I could give you 5 reasons on the other side. So the mantra we always use, it's about risk. I think you used the term earlier. It's how do you de-risk your position? Is energy a big expense? Is it 1 or 2% of your cost? Can you take some risk if it's only 1 or 2%? Is it 10%? Is it really going to affect your budget going forward? Maybe you want to de-risk a little bit more. So it involves not only the market, but also what the customer's needs are as well.
Yeah.
But trying to predict, we stay as far away. The adage I've heard is the market's always right. Everything that's known has been priced into this
and
market
so
right
you're dealing with commercial industrial off-takers. That's your bread and butter, right?
Yeah, and
Okay.
public as well.
And so if I'm the CFO of a manufacturer and my contract with my retail electric supplier, okay, we're in a deregulated state here in Illinois. We have 70 or so retail electric suppliers, right? Then I'm going to go to market, so to speak, with a consultant like yourself who knows where to get the good pricing. There's a small handful of companies then that you will go out to bid to probably, right? And then you're proposing to me as an off-taker what? What is the basic proposition in terms of the length of the contract and the guarantees or lack of guarantees and just explain how that works.
Sure. So that's a good question. So then it goes back to the customer too. For instance, a manufacturer, we ask questions about how do they price their products? Can they go back? Do they have annual contracts that they're locked into and they can't change? Then we want to de-risk quite a bit. Commercial property, they've got a finite income stream called rents. They want to de-risk very much. They're very budget oriented. So it's going to matter on the client. From a long-term standpoint, what we're seeing a lot of is not a fully fixed. Maybe they'll lock half of their usage, and then we're watching the market for the other half. That's been a lot more popular here in the last 4 months. Just when you're in an environment where you just don't know, that allows them to either lock more in the future if we see rates continue to escalate, or B, we see that fall, then they could lock the rest of their usage as well. So you're trying to kind of apportion their risk across time as well.
But so could I
Is another.
delay getting into a longer term contract? Could I get into a short term contract because I want to see how things are going to play out?
Yep. Yeah. The name of the day prior to this increase was a 3 and a 4 year lock. It was every year was a rate decrease, so they lock as long as they could. Now it's a nuanced approach. It's either locking shorter term and watching the market. However, shorter term rates are higher right now. So maybe you want to lock longer term, but not lock all your usage. So we want to present as many options to the customer as possible, but we want to know their business and their space as well. What's important
Yeah.
to them, and match those
Yeah.
two up.
And so what I hear you saying is, well, sorry, Mr. Customer, I don't have a crystal ball. Prices are maybe going up today, but they could easily shift to a downward trend in a year's time or even less. Do you honestly think that that's realistic, though, that we would go in just a short period of time? Or is there some kind of a typical pattern to these cycles that we go from inflation to deflation to inflation?
They do. There's patterns, but this market is totally different that we've seen before. I've heard the term unprecedented. I don't know how many times since COVID began, but this is unprecedented. Primarily because the increases that we saw in '08, the market was pricing for demand destruction. It was going up and up till the market said uncle. And frankly, we didn't hit that. The reason the market fell in '08 was because of the credit bubble, not because we hit that ceiling of where prices, basically the market can't take them anymore. So now we see the same thing as the rate is going up and up and up, pricing for demand destruction. But we don't have that as of yet, we don't have that credit bubble bursting. So we could, there's a fear that we could surpass where we were in '08 because of some of the market dynamics.
And what is it that happened in '08? Refresh our memory.
Yeah. So commodities in general went up and up, primarily fueled by the credit market. Lehman Brothers was actually one of the biggest investors in the energy space. And when Lehman went away and declared bankruptcy, that's really when we saw the capital dried up for energy. And when retail suppliers facilitate these deals with customers, it's a heavy credit funded industry. The banks underwrite everything that goes on. So when the credit went away, basically the transactions went away as well. And that demand just fell off overnight. And then we saw a big crash in commodities. So again, without that credit overhang in this market, there's legitimate supply concerns now with respect to funding. The banks are, that funded the shale boom for years are now turning overnight and headed the other way. There's a black eye because natural gas has a carbon footprint, and they don't want to touch anything with fossil fuels right now. So the credit market is really one of the bigger drivers why we're really worried about production of natural gas right now and the effect on prices.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Clean Power Hour or viewing it on YouTube. We do have a great YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please go to cleanpower.group and hit that YouTube icon and subscribe to our channel. Of course, you can find all of our content on your favorite audio platform as well. So please give us a rating and review. I wanted to let you know that we are partnered with the Midwest Solar Expo this year. Check it out, midwestsolarexpo.com. You can get a 15% discount with our code, which is CPH15. We will also put that in the show notes, CPH numeral 15. The Midwest Solar Expo is the premier B2B solar and clean energy event in the region. It hosts over 450 clean tech executives from around the country, and it's a lovely event in Minneapolis, June 20th to 22nd. So please check it out. Back to the show. Let's talk about the regionality of energy. It is a very regional industry. I mentioned that we have low energy prices here in the Midwest. one of
Mhm.
the rules of thumb there is, okay, we have cheap coal and natural gas and nuclear power. Um,
Mhm.
but and then it's well known that if you go to the coast, if you go to New York or New Jersey or Massachusetts, or then to the West Coast, California, energy is going to be at least 2x and sometimes 3 to 4x what we pay here in the Midwest. Give our listeners some perspective on that phenomenon.
Sure. Region Illinois actually exports power. We make more than we use. So certainly this market has been the price increase isn't as drastic as we see in other markets. Um, Eastern part of PJM rates are going up, but again, they've got a lot of supply from Pennsylvania shale natural gas as well. So those aren't really markets of worry right now. Really, what we're seeing is New York. They just had a big retirement of Indian Point was a big nuclear facility just outside of New York City that retired in April of 21, I believe. And what replaced it was natural gas fired generation. A ton of it. They have 4 or 5 different plants that took the place of one
Mhm.
nuclear plant. And now they're beholden to much more of the natural gas market New York is. So they've seen really ugly rates because of that. With New England, though, it's primarily was a heating oil fueled region. They didn't use natural gas, so we never had the pipes that went to New England as a
Mhm.
nation. And now, when they started using natural gas, um, some pipelines were constructed, but they're still importing natural gas right now. There's the only U.S. import terminal for LNG is in Everett, Massachusetts. So they compete with Asia and Europe to attract those cargoes to their import facility. So that $5 to $6 decatherm that the U.S. is paying, they're competing in a $30 to $40 per decatherm market. So that's really one of the more problematic regions that we've seen is New England. Um, Texas is an energy rich state, so we haven't seen the price increase in Texas as much. And California, more so than other states, they've actually started shutting down multiple megawatt hours of natural gas fired generation because of basically state regulations. So they've seen rates go up to the tune of about 40% in California. So there's a lot of pain in that California market, primarily because of regulatory reasons versus logistical, like the New England market.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is exciting to see the energy transition happening. We see many utilities, not just in California, but here in the Midwest, converting from
Mhm.
natural gas and coal to solar, wind, and battery storage. We saw major RFPs from Excel and NIPSCO in the last couple of years here in the Midwest. And we're talking gigawatts and gigawatts of solar, wind, and battery storage. And they're doing that with an eye on the economics, trying to be fiduciary, be good stewards of their stakeholders and investors and return
Mhm.
a profit to them, right? Um, and but then there is this unexpected volatility, and sometimes things get out of step. That's certainly the situation in Germany, right, where they closed some nuclear plants, and then they're trying to wean off of natural gas, and then the Russians just cut the tap off uh, last
Mhm.
year before the war. They started, tightening the tap, so to speak. So prices were going up, and then the war, and everybody's trying to get off, and it's a mess. And as Elon Musk recently pointed out, they do have some nuclear plants that they could reboot, and not talking about building new. Building new plants doesn't make sense because it's very time consuming. It takes at least 10 years, and then the power is expensive from those facilities. But rebooting an existing facility or keeping an existing facility, which is what we're doing here in Illinois, where half of our grid power comes from nuclear, we're keeping those plants running with some subsidies that are also subsidizing the energy transition, fueling renewable energy credits for wind, solar, and battery storage. So it's a both and, but it's low carbon. So we energy professionals in the energy transition, we generally don't argue with keeping nuclear up and running, so to speak, as long as it makes good economic sense. Um, What else should our listeners know about energy markets, though? What else is, of interest to you? What do you want to talk about or let our listeners know about?
Sure. Well, I think to your point, with the rise in energy rates, it's created another opportunity for renewables. We're talking about economics behind renewables, not just being good stewards. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and then there's a resiliency play too. When we see things like Texas and the winter storm Uri, there's some vulnerability to the grid
Just a
as
wee
well.
bit.
Um,
Uh,
yeah. Well, you mentioned even Tim. You mentioned Germany. They went through about 6 months where they saw no wind. They're heavy wind,
yes.
and they saw in 2021 their production go down nationally by about 10% versus 2020. So there's even we talk about weather risks. We talk about that historically in terms of where rates are at, but there's a weather risk as far as renewables as well. So you need that battery for that resiliency component as well. So that's going to
Yep.
open up opportunities there as well. The other thing too is not that many people are talking about it, but these states when they pass you know uh, um, carbon neutral targets, typically that means higher costs. So like Illinois, that the ComEd rates are they're escalating every year, and I don't think people have seen that. Yeah, that starts in June of this year. It's coming, and that creates economic opportunities for renewables as well. They're raising rates, but they're also opening up a ton of opportunity through rebates and incentives for renewables.
Yeah.
So those customers that know it and they're on the front end of this conversation, their economics just get that much better because um, um, they do it. They're early adopters and they avoid all those rate increases that are coming.
Right. And so I'm curious, when you and your staff are talking to your customers, where is renewable energy in the conversation? Are there customers who are asking proactively for renewable energy and wanting to understand that landscape, or what are you hearing on the street, so to speak?
Yeah, there's a hard shelf, Tim, where bigger customers have a head of sustainability. They're fully in. Below that, though, it becomes a little more fragmented. We're having the conversation a lot more, and some are adopting, but it's certainly at the conversation stage now. But the bigger the company, the more active they're going to be. But as you get into that mid tier and manufacturers and office buildings, it's starting with conversation. But certainly when they're starting to see these rate increases, we're looking at some gas year to year that are almost 100% increases right now. When they start to feel the pain, then renewables become an economic discussion as much as an environmental one.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I always lead with the economics of solar if I'm talking to a commercial industrial off taker. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
10% are truly interested in the environmental aspects or the sustainability aspects, and those are legit. And clean energy is a great way to reduce your carbon footprint, but economics rule. And
Right.
now we have good solar programs in many states, like the Illinois market, like Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, of course, California, Colorado, New Mexico, Minnesota. There's so many good states now, and it's only going to increase as time goes on. But it's a both end. It's market forces and legislation. Um, and it takes both hands, so to speak, to really make this energy transition.
Yes.
Well, I want to make a couple of announcements, and then we'll let our listeners know how they can reach you, Michael. Again,
Sure.
check out all of our content at cleanpower.group/podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just click on that YouTube link right there and subscribe to the channel. You can, if you can find us on all of your favorite platforms, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Google, etc. Please give us a rating and review on particularly Apple and Spotify. Those reviews help others find the show. And reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter, TG Montague. That's my email handle on Gmail also. So TG Montague. And there's also a contact us form on cleanpower.group. So it's easy to find me. I love hearing from my listeners, love hearing ideas for guests and topics to cover. We cover everything under the energy transition sun. So solar, wind, energy storage. And I also have a co-host. We do a Thursday live lately, news roundup of the energy transition news. So just look for us on LinkedIn or YouTube Live, 10:45 Central, 11:45 Eastern, and look forward to hearing from you. So, Michael, with Nania Energy, how can our listeners find you?
Sure. LinkedIn is one. Our website is naniaenergy.com. Or you can email me as well. It's M and then my last name, Decaluwe, DECALUWE at naniaenergy.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I look forward to seeing prices go down next year. I'm crossing my fingers. Yeah. No, actually, we need to pay the true cost of energy, and so I'm not a fan of unusually low energy prices, and so a little increase in energy prices is okay. We need to be aware that it comes at a cost. But anyway, and as prices go up, it makes solar pencil all the better. So there is that as well.
Sure.
With that, I will let you go. And I'm Tim Montague, your host. Let's grow solar and storage. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Tim.